following is a presentation of the iRacing Esports Network.
Situated upon the Ile de Notre Dame sits the circuit appropriately named after one of the most memorable racing drivers of all time. This track, along with the drive it pays tribute to, the French-Canadian Gilles Villeneuve, is known for being exciting and producing some spectacular, unforgettable and surprising memories. Who knows what we're going to see today? It's round 6, the halfway point of a Batteries Not Included Championship, and you're going to get to see all of the action unfold live here on the Global Sim Racing channel and the iRacing Esports Network. Hello everyone, I'm Samuel Ryman, and alongside me in the booth is Johan van den Velde. Behind the scenes during all of the button pushing is our director Sean Ambrose. He's using camera sets provided by Dougie Beard. Johan, some drivers love this circuit and some drivers don't, but one thing you can't deny is that from the very first race here, all the way up until today, this circuit truly does produce some unforgettable races.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Canada and Formula One have had a rich relationship together for decades, and Circuit Gilles Villeneuve is largely to thank for that. The circuit is located in Montreal and lies on two islands in the St. Lawrence River that were used for several international events, including the 1976 Summer Olympics. 2 years after this event, the track was built, which has hosted F1 Grand Prix over 30 times. But the track itself has always been synonymous with the walls around it. Many drivers have seen the races end in the Canadian concrete, but maybe the most famous of these barriers is the final chicane, the lovingly called Wall of Champions. In 1999, Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve all destroyed their car here, giving the corner its famous name. Now, overtaking is difficult on the street circuit, and the best option is probably going into the final chicane or setting yourself up here for a move into turn 1. But to be able to do this, drivers have to be brave and follow their rivals almost blindsided during the rest of the track. And even when you don't have to follow another car close, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve can be very tricky, with big curbstones waiting to unsettle cars and send them to an always present barrier. And to see how this looks like from the driver's point of view, let's hop on board our GSRC FW31 for a lap around Montreal.
Alright, Samuel Ryman is behind the wheel of the GSRC FW31, so let's do a lap around Montreal. Turn 1 is going to be a huge bottleneck on lap 1, so look out for drivers with bad spatial awareness collecting one another. This first chicane can be a passing zone, but a very difficult one because of the switchback. As we head to 3 and 4, I think this chicane is equally as dangerous as the Wall of Champions. Greedy drivers will pay the price and end their day on the wall on the right. Flat out through 5, and then stay to the right to set up for 6. It's a very slow left-hander, but 7's going to really open up on the exit. Plus, it leads onto the backstretch, so a stable car will be critical. Otherwise, more confident drivers will breeze by easily. Now we get ready for 8 and 9. There's going to be some giant sausage curbs on both apexes, so give them a wide berth unless you're feeling brave. A slow exit out of here to the hairpin is also dangerous since it allows the car behind a good passing opportunity. In fact, it's the only braking zone that isn't into a chicane. Low speed grip is the key to making sure you get a good launch down this long final stretch. With the draft, it could even pay off to set up your opponent by late apexing the hairpin and then blowing by them on the straight. But now we need to stay left and spot our brake marker for the final chicane. A fast lap requires us to straighten it out as much as we can. Use the curbs, but don't fly off them too hard, or the Wall of Champions will claim yet another victim. If you cleared it, you finished a lap around Montreal.
And that was the great Samuel Ryman taking us on a lap around the Montreal circuit in the Williams F1 car. And I did better than that guy, that's for sure. Yeah, that was an unfortunate moment as practice comes to an end right there, and qualifying getting set to start. Talking about great things, we're glad you're here to watch this broadcast today on the iRacing Esports Network. If you haven't gone ahead and subscribed to them already, do that, because they have lots of great races throughout the week. on road courses, on ovals, dirt racing, and of course with the racing season heating up, March just around the corner, when things start getting warm again and people start to want to get kicked back up into high gear for the new 2019 racing season. There's going to be plenty more to come, so I hope you're there to check all that out. Let's have a closer look at what we're up against today, Johan, with our race details.
This race at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, as Sam already mentioned, is the halfway point once the check flag drop. Round 6 of our 12-round championship, and you see 4 watermarks behind it. That means that there are 4 drop weeks. In other words, the 4 worst result of each driver will be removed at the end of the season to basically give them a little bit of leeway if things go wrong during the season. The race today, however, 46 times will drive around this circuit with open setups, so drivers can change everything they want on the car. They can increase tire pressure, change the flaps on the wings, everything they want, so they can really conquer the circuit as best to their ability, and they use a 67% fuel tank doing so. This means that they will make 1 pit stop during the race. There's no incident cap during this event. The admins will keep an eye on drivers abusing that, so they cannot willy-nilly score 1 access whenever they want. They have to not abuse that during the race, and the points are official iRacing points based on the strength of field and the amount of drivers here today in Montreal.
Alright, so let's have a look at those drivers. You mentioned that these drivers will have 4 drop weeks at the end of the season. Well, since we're 5 rounds into this 12-week season, we've gone ahead and accounted for 1 of the drop weeks just to give a bit more balance to the point standings. And there you see Clayton McLeod finds himself just on top ahead of Floris Bischoff. Thomas Ziege has been doing very well recently. He only sits 35 points back. And while Reed Miller sits back in 4th place, taking that from Dave Peterson, while all that's going on, the big name in the recent rounds, Johan, is nowhere to be seen in this top 5 on driver standings yet, but he's coming.
Yeah, that is Mark Usher. He won already 2 races so far this season and is currently sitting P7 overall. If you look at the standings, the reason that he's sitting in P7 is because he only participated in 2 races that he both won, of course. That's really impressive driving so far from Mark Usher, and especially with all those drop weeks considered that we were talking about. If Mark Usher just keeps showing up, keep driving the pace that he has been showing, for example last week at Barber, he will be probably the favorite for the championship title in this batteries not included championship. Now, once again, Mark Usher is here today, and looking at the practice time, Sam, he was the quickest once again, beating Thomas Ziege by 0.4 of a second in practice.
Yeah, we were just watching Thomas Ziege, who is currently 3rd fastest in qualifying. Usher's yet to set a time, but here you see him coming on down the back straight once he gets around the chicane, the Wall of Champions. We'll cross the line and we see if we get a competitive time here for the driver of the number 11 machine. Okay, it doesn't. It looks like this is actually a second outlap. I'm showing that he's on the. Yep. So he must have had something happen on him his first outlap that caused him to have to do another one. Now, of course, one nice thing, obviously, about qualifying around such a short track like this, Johan, is you have a lot of attempts within this 10-minute period to try and get a time.
Yeah, especially if you hang it in a barrier, that is very easy, as we mentioned earlier in the track guide. Once that happens, the outlap is very short, so it's easy to just pop back into the pits, get a new car, and give yourself another shot to try and get a good lap in. On screen at the moment we're seeing Steven Kempson. Steven's currently sitting P3 overall. He was quite quick in practice as well. He was 1 position down there in that session. He was only P4 there, but in qualifying he's already half a second quicker than he was in practice. So Steven really getting the hammer down. Now qualifying is starting. With a P3 currently, he's sitting very good for a good start here in Montreal.
But how much longer is that going to last? Because Mark Usher is once again coming through the final chicane by the Wall of Champions. He's kept on the track this lap. This lap time is going to count. It's a hot lap. He's across the line. But it is not very fast. Only 5th fastest for Mark Usher. Puts him behind Ziege, Marco Sanfilippo, Stephen Kempson and Scott Newton. And let's give a bit of a mention here to the guy currently sitting second, Marco Sanfilippo. We've seen him in several races this season, but normally him and his relative Danilo Sanfilippo don't set times in qualifying. They normally start at the back and then work their way up to the middle of the field. They seem quite competitive here today, and they're setting good times in qualifying, so it will be interesting to see what Marco and also Danilo can do today.
And Marco coming over the start-finish line now, he only manages a 17.1 that time around, 1 second slower than his quickly qualifying time. But you're absolutely right, Sam, especially Marco, if I have to say, from the two Sanfilippos that we see on track, has really improved in qualifying compared to his practice time. An incredible 7/10 of a second he is quicker, and that nets him P2 at this moment, just behind Thomas Seeger, who as well is just very quick. He's one of the only two drivers that have actually managed to set a 1:15 so far in this session, with Thomas Seeger having a 1:15.9. Mark Usher just going very quick. I see him pop up. You can see him on top of your screen. He is currently sitting second, but he just cannot get close to his practice time like other drivers are able to.
Yeah, and as soon as Mark set that time, he went back into the pits and got a new car. He's going back out for one more attempt. Clayton McLeod across the line. Can he improve from 5th place? Yes, he can. He goes up to 4th place. Other names worth keeping an eye on right now. Notably, Scott Newton is down in 6th, and we know he's very fast, so we'll see if he's able to jump up.
Scott Newton just had to avoid a huge crash from David Lee Patterson coming out of turn 7, that was. That might actually ruin Scott Newton's lap time a little bit here. But as you're saying, I was almost surprised to see the pace that Scott Newton had in qualifying, because we're used to seeing Scott on the front of the field, but the Australian just doesn't have the pace that he normally has. And in practice, he was only of course P5. In qualifying, he's only P6. And let's see, as he's coming over Casino Straight, he's able to improve that lap time. He has to win half a second to get to professional pole position. He's going through the Wolf Championship chicane now. Back on the throttle. Very short straight until he reaches the start-finish line. He keeps it all the way on the right, crosses the start-finish line and goes to a 1:15.7. So now I take everything back. I just said Scott Newton does have the pace, because what a blistering lap that was. Good enough for professional pole.
He's not satisfied though. He takes it to the pits and comes out. He'll have enough time to get a hot lap in. So currently, Newton sits on the top, only by about 1.5 tenths though, over Thomas Zegan second. Mark Usher has been demoted down to 3rd place ahead of the aforementioned Marco Sanfilippo, and league organiser Clayton McLeod is keeping his name in the mix too, down there in 5th. And boy, let's be honest here, we have a small field today of 14 cars, but right now, the top 7 of them, half a field, are covered within a second.
Yeah, it's extremely close. Thomas Seeger, just a little update on him, the P2 driver. He was on a flyer lap around a minute ago, but he outbraked himself in a hairpin, and that's really bad for the DH driver, because that means that he doesn't have enough time left to actually get a quick lap time in. So that mistake in the hairpin cost Thomas Seeger another chance to defend a P2 position, or even trying to get a provisional pole away from Scott Newton. Mark Usher coming from the last corner now. This looks like he's setting himself up for a flyer now with 1 minute left to go. He will have more than enough time to finish this lap and try and attack Scott Newton for that pole position.
Working his way out of the first chicane as Clayton McLeod works his way on down the back straight. Currently sitting 5th, only 6 thousandths of a second back of Mark Sanfilippo in 4th place. Might be about to jump up into the front top 2 rows. Let's see what he does as he comes across the line. 4th place. He found that 6 thousandths of a second he needed.
Scott Newton is on the flyer, of course, with the qualifying time left to qualify almost over. You can see it on top of the screen, only 11 seconds to go. Scott Newton really has to nail this lap to try and defend himself from a lot of drivers that are very close to him. The gap between him and Thomas Seeger is around 0.2 of a second. You can see the finish flag is out, so that means that all the drivers that come over start-finish line now will finish the lap. Mark Usher is before
Yes,
Scott
he's
Newton.
coming out the final chicane right now, about to cross the line. It's been a solid lap. And
he
it
does
will
it.
improve his time to the top.
Wow, what a lap time from Mark Wisher there. Does Scott Newton have an answer to that? He is coming over the start-finish line. He has to win 2 seconds. He doesn't win 2/10 of a second, only 1/10 of a second, and he is 400ths behind Mark Usher. Enough for the front row, not enough for pole position.
Marco Sanfilippo crashing out into the wall of champions at the end of a lap. I think he ran into... oh no, he was actually trying to get out the way of another car who was on a hot lap, so there was an incident there, ruins both their laps, and that is going to end qualifying. So, at the time of asking, Mark Usher pulls through, takes pole by about 300ths of a second over Scott Newton. That is going to be your front row for today's race. Behind them, Thomas Ziegler and Clayton McLeod, two big names in the championship, sitting third and fourth ahead of Marco Sanfilippo. What can he do from fifth? Steve Kempson sits in sixth place, and rounding out the first half of the field is Danilo Sanfilippo.
He shares row 4 of the grid with Jan Hofman, who's sitting in P8. Alan Morgan shares row 5 with David Lee Patterson in P10. The first driver outside of the top 10 is Andrew Adair Sanders. He starts the race in P11 next to Dirk Boetken. Manuel Gomez Esteban can be found on P13, and one driver didn't set a qualifying time, and that's Jean Brunet. He starts the race in 14th position.
Two things of note. First off, David Lee Patterson that we've mentioned a couple of times so far during this broadcast. Let's not confuse him with Dave Peterson, the driver sitting fourth in the points right now. Dave Peterson isn't here today, nor is Floris Bichard, so that could definitely have an impact in the point standings. I have a feeling a lot of our regulars might be tied up with the iRacing 24 Hours of Daytona going on this weekend. Another thing to make a note of is Mark Usher was just asking the field how much fuel do you actually burn during the whole race. So that's a worrisome indication that our pole sitter might not necessarily have the optimal strategy lined up for today's race. But they have a couple minutes to get gridded here, so he's got a couple minutes to figure out how much he wants to put in the tank for what's going to be quite a warm day here in Montreal.
Yeah, this 25 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, 37 degrees Celsius track temperature. You can see the Fahrenheit conversions on screen there. Partly cloudy conditions, but as you can see on screen now, it is not very cloudy. It's quite a lot of sun, but the wind is quite strong as well. It's currently 14 kilometers an hour southwestern wind. Drivers will have to keep that in mind. The barriers are high there, but the wind can surely play a factor at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve.
Still waiting for Mark Usher to calculate how much fuel he wants to put on board for the start of this, and then he'll take his spot ahead of Scott Newton, Thomas Ziegler, Clayton McLeod, Marco Sanfilippo, and the rest of the field. There they are. And here we go. The lights are up. And the lights are off, and away they go. Not a great start by Usher. Thomas Newton is going to shoot into the lead before they ever get to the first corner. Three-way battle for third place, being won by Clayton McLeod ahead of Thomas Ziegler, and now Marco Sanfilippo and Stephen Kempson on his inside.
In the back of the field there was young Rocketman Hoffman with a great start, but he was being caught by two cars starting in front of him very slow. He couldn't find a way past, so he stays P7 way or P8 way he started.
So Newton straight up to the top, and Clayton McLeod has overshot the third chicane, and that could cost him third position to Thomas Ziegler, who's going to try and close the door before they get to the right-hander. Ziegler not letting McLeod get that position back. McLeod overshoots that chicane as well. Very much struggling on this opening lap. That's going to cost him fourth place to Kempson.
And what an accordion effect behind him. Marco Sanfilippo and Jan Hofman both had to step on the brakes to avoid the drivers in front of him. McLeod now has the outside line through the hairpin. He will get overtaken by Stephen Kempson, but the outside line will give him more momentum on the Casino Straight here towards the final chicane of the track. It's Stephen Kempson on the inside. It is Clayton McLeod on the outside. You can see them there still side by side. Who will blink first? Under braking. Clayton McLeod brakes a little bit later, and he actually makes it stick though. But that will give him an inferior racing line. Stephen Kempson might have a little bit more speed now going into turn one. He takes a look Doesn't dare to keep it side by side, but Marco Sanfilippo behind him looks very thirsty for an overtake. No, it all stays single file though as they go through turn 1, turn 2.
Good scrap for 4th position, but it's cost him time to the top 3. Scott Newton, Mark Usher and Thomas Ziegler checking out from them all a little bit. Then we have this pack from 4th going on back to 8th place with David Lee Patterson, who's been one of the bigger movers at the start here, moving up 2 positions from where he started.
And at the moment though, it is really Clayton McLeod almost like a cork on a bottle, holding everyone back behind him. He seems really uncomfortable with high fuel load at this point of the race. In front of them it is Mark Usher, still behind Scott Newton, our race leader. Now there's around 9/10 of a second between the two, 7/10 of a second coming out of the chicane. So Mark Usher kind of clawing his way back to the Australian in front of him. Thomas Ziegler behind him though cannot follow the speed at the moment. He's driving a little bit in no man's land, far in front of Clayton McLeod, and seeing Mark Usher and Scott Newton disappear in front of him.
I think what we have going on here, honestly, with Clayton McLeod in 4th, this doesn't surprise me too much. Clayton McLeod's...
Sorry, Alan Morgan in the wall. Yeah, Alan Morgan hit the wall of champions. I don't think he has to retire, but that will give the suspension of that car quite a knock. He immediately got overtaken by Andrew Adair Sanders behind him.
We've got a replay here, so this is the rescue run at the Wall of Champions.
Go on board with Alan here as he actually makes a slight mistake there. He can crash a lot harder in the Wall of Champions, but he has a little tap there. That will hurt his suspension a little bit, and of course make sure that he loses position. Actually, he is in a wall currently. He spun it around on the exit of turn 7. And I think that this is probably a lot... doesn't give him that much damage, he still can continue. And Alan Morgan's struggling a bit with the handling of his car.
We just had the change for 5th place. Marco Sanfilippo got by Stephen Kempson, but as they go into the hairpin, the battle's brewing again because Sanfilippo has got it back.
And
but here goes Kempson. He's got a nice run going on down the straight. He's going to back out though. He's not going to make a move.
Maybe he wants to set himself up for a move in turn 1, but while trying that he loses a lot of track position to Marco Sanfilippo, and Jan Hofman behind him looks very feisty. He takes a look on the inside of turn 1, Stephen Kempson around the outside. You can actually keep it there, but almost loses control. Car very slidey of Stephen Kempson as he goes through turn 1. Jan Hofman cannot find a way past. But this is great news for the two drivers in front, Marco Sanfilippo and Clayton McLeod, who are just stretching away from Stephen Kempson in P6.
And all this, like you mentioned, all this allowing Clayton McLeod to kind of not have as many cars hounding him on his rear win. But like I say, this isn't unusual for Clayton McLeod, especially during the races where he emerges a victor. He usually utilises a strategy where he goes long at the start of a race and makes his time back up towards the end of a race. But the other thing I noticed, when he was heading that train of cars earlier on, no one could do anything with him on the straight. Oh, as we get spin at the hairpin.
Ooh, the Stephen Kempson being spinning himself around there. We go to a replay of that because Jan Hofman and David Lee Pedersen behind him were slightly involved as well, as they were trying to avoid Stephen Kempson spinning there.
And as we come back to live action, we'll have to go back up front because Mark Usher has run our leader Scott Newton down. We'll get one view of what happened to Kempson here, just got a little out of shape in the hairpin. And now we rejoin live action and the battle breaks up a little bit. Usher couldn't quite stick with Newton during the twisty part of the circuit.
It's very difficult to stay close to the driver in front, of course, when it is very twisty. You get blindsided in a lot of corners. In the meantime, just a quick update on Alan Morgan. We saw him hit the wall in the Wall of Champions. He has retired his race. He visited his pit crew, realized there was too much damage and has called it a hold for today. So he's the first retiree of today after Manuel Gomez Esteban also didn't see the grid.
So that means there's only 12 cars now on track, but the top two are covered within a second. Scott Newton's been able to open that gap back up to Usher a bit. And now I was trying to make a note a little while ago of how Clayton McLeod, it looked like he had a very low downforce setting trimmed on his car. He was very difficult to catch on the straights. It will be interesting to see if Newton or Usher have elected for different setups. See if Usher is able to run Newton down on the straights, or if it's this infield portion where there's a lot of twists and turns, it maybe he has a bit more downforce and he'll be able to run Newton down.
And look, that's one of the interesting things about Montreal. It is a street circuit, so overtaking will be very difficult. No matter how much you try, even with different setups, it will still be difficult to make overtaking maneuvers stick. So I think that most drivers would try to elect to pass their rivals with a little bit of strategy. I wouldn't be surprised to, for example, see Marc Usher try and undercut to get his way by Scott Newton.
Yeah, so now we catch back up with Steve Kempson after his little spin or sideways slide through the hairpin. He's dropped back to 7th place. His teammate David Lee Patterson behind him in 8th position. And behind them, and Kempson's had another spin. And once again able to keep it off a wall, but this one going to cost him a few more spots.
Yeah, that's frustrating for Kempson. This was something that I saw a lot in practice. Just drivers getting very loose, a lot of oversteer once they get the power down. Especially because a lot of times in Montreal, when you get the power down, it is not in a straight line. It is in a half curvy way, which makes it a little bit more difficult to keep the car in a straight line. You can just see here Stephen Kempson, when he tries to get going, he loops it around and all. That cost him 2 positions to Danilo Sanfilippo and Andrew Adair Sanders in front of him, who are actually on a nice battle at the moment. Maybe we can go to that, because Danilo seems to try a move into turn 1. He takes a little look on the inside, but Andrew Adair Sanders fends that off. But these two drivers are very close. This is the battle for P8. So we have a lot of battles throughout the field at this stage of the race.
Yeah, Saunders' car was stepping out a little bit under braking there for turn 1, but he was able to hold on to it and retain his 8th position for now. Trying to run an island of their own. They got 5 seconds over Kempson after his latest spin, but they're about 3 seconds back from Patterson. We come back up here, the 4th place, where Clayton McLeod is being run down again by Marco Sanfilippo. Let's not forget, Clayton had a lot of cars on his tail at the start of this race. He was able to pull away from them all when they started battling, but now, the 36 has found the one again. Yeah,
and it's interesting to see that both drivers are just struggling with controlling the car at the moment. It was Clayton McLeod who was struggling out of turn 9 and lost a lot of position. That allowed Marco Sanfilippo to close up, but then out of the hairpin it was Marco making a mistake. And that ruined his chances to get by the Canadian here in his home Grand Prix. Still, these drivers are basically under the blanket at this point of the race and are giving it a good scrap for P4. But I have to say, Sam, that I don't think Clayton McLeod is very happy to be fighting with Marco Sanfilippo, because his main rival in the championship, Thomas Seeger, in front of him. Well, Thomas Seeger is just striding away at the moment.
Yeah, but at the same point, it is still very early on in this race, and we know the batteries not included as a history of attrition playing a factor towards the latter portions of a race, and Montreal has a history of attrition playing a factor. So this battle, if these two could keep it on track, could very easily come down to being a battle for 2nd or 3rd later on. So these drivers are going to try their best to win that position. Right now, Clayton doing a good job of holding on to it. We mentioned memorable things at Montreal, and we may have just had one.
Yeah, it was Jean Brunet getting a little spin on the exit of turn 7. Basically, what we saw Stephen Kempson do a few laps ago as well. He went on a little spin there, got it going again. I think he might have a little bit of front wing damage. And he keeps it going again. And as we go to a replay of that, one thing that I wanted to see, or what I noticed, probably you can notice it as well on track, is the clouds are coming. The track is changing because the clouds are in front of the sun, which means that the track temperature will suddenly dip quite a bit compared to it was at the start of the race. So the drivers have to adapt to that on the fly. How does the car feel under these lower temperature conditions? What we didn't have in practice and didn't have in qualifying. And they have to make sure that the car still stays in a straight line, even though the conditions now are different.
Jean Brunet didn't lose any positions from that spin because he had been running in 12th and last anyway. Still not too far back off his competitors though, so hopefully he'll get back up there. This battle for 9th place is on. because Steve Kempson has running Andrew Adair Saunders down. Remember, Kempson is fast, but he has had a couple spins early on, put him back down to 10th. Now he's got 9th place back. And he'll try and run Danilo Sanfilippo down as his next victim in 8th place.
Great overtake there from Stephen Kempson. He saw that Andrew in front of him made a small mistake, so he braked a little bit more, chose a different racing line through turn 6 and 7, and that really set him up for a lot more speed and the overtaking opportunity. Good driving from him, getting that position. In the meantime, the closest battle that we have at the moment is for P4. That is the one between Clayton McLeod and Marco Sanfilippo. Still, these two drivers are quite close together. You can see it on screen, around half a second between these two. Marco Sanfilippo just cannot find a way past the Canadian yet, and I'm actually wondering if Marco Sanfilippo was driving in no man's land, if he had clean air in front of him, would he be able to drive quicker laps as Clayton McLeod currently is doing? I'm curious to see if Sanfilippo will try maybe a different strategy to give himself this free air and try to overtake McLeod that way.
Now, due to the series restriction on how much fuel you can have in your car at the start of a race, fuel and pit strategy will be a factor, but it is too early now. Pretty much every single race is a one-stopper. Boy, Clayton really got that car turning on the entry there. Almost looked like he was sliding, but he made it work and is able to keep a good gap over Marco Sanfilippo. But the significant point there, Johan, is that okay, well, Marco can't try and undercut now. He wouldn't be able to get to the end with the amount of fuel he had in his tank, but there could be a strategy he could implement later.
Absolutely, and if he's actually quicker than Clayton McLeod at this moment, he maybe can actually fuel save a little bit and realize himself a shorter pit stop later in the race. Looking further down the fields, we saw Stephen Kempson getting by Andrew Adair Saunders. Now, Stephen is currently clawing down the gap between him and Danilo Sanfilippo quite quickly, or at least he was last time around. This time around, there's only half a second between the two. Surely but steadily, Stephen Kempson is trying to recover from those two half spins that he had. And closing down the gap to P8, working his way forward.
The battle at the top end of the field, you can see, has broken up. Scott Newton has been able to pull away from Mark Usher during the last few laps. I have a feeling that Newton must have just made a mistake several laps ago. He definitely seems to have the faster car at this point in the race.
Yeah, you can see it on the bottom of the screen. Last time around it was Mark Usher, slightly quicker, 0.3 of a second, but as you say, overall pace at this moment, Scott Newton is just a little bit more consistent, a little bit quicker, just able to distance himself bit by bit from Mark Usher. Now behind him, talking about distancing a bit, Clayton McLeod is not able to distance himself from Marco Sanfilippo. They're still about the same distance as they were last time we checked in on this battle for P4. Now this wasn't the case earlier in this lap, but Marco Sanfilippo was almost on the gearbox of Clayton McLeod, going towards the hairpin, but he couldn't get a good exit out of that corner. Well, once again, you mentioned it before, Sam, that maybe Clayton McLeod is running with a different wing setting than the drivers behind him. If that setup is true and he's using a setup like that, it's working for him because drivers cannot find a way past the Canadian at that moment.
So Clayton McLeod holding on to a pretty fourth position right now. Now, one thing that is unfortunate about this smaller car count, even though we've seen a good race so far, granted it's very early on, is that there's not gonna be a whole lot of points.
Sorry. Yeah, also not a lot of points, I think, today for David Lee Patterson, who went hard into the wall in turn 7. He immediately took a tow to the pits there, but I think that might actually be a little bit of suspension damage for the UK&I driver as well. Take a look here as he's going through turn 3 and 4. Everything goes great here. Brakes on time, but once he hits the apex here of turn 6, he clubbers the curbs a little bit too hard. That unsettles the car, and then hard into the barrier there. That will give him some damage. Front wing and on suspension. He's currently sitting in the pits waiting repairs.
12 laps into a 46 lap race before we first see our first driver in the wall. I take that back, though. Something happened to Alan Morgan earlier on. But this is a rather long race here today, Johan. I mean, 46 laps around this track. This is going to be about an hour-long race. So these drivers will have to be careful during the second half that they don't become complacent. They don't start to get fatigued or anything, just fall into a rhythm and then suddenly get caught off guard when something on the track changes.
Absolutely, concentration is key, and especially on a track like this where you know there's always barriers around you. Even if you make a slight mistake, the chance is so incredibly big that you end your race doing it like that. This is one of the races where you have to be top notch in your concentration and make sure that you don't make any mistakes out here on track. Currently on screen we see our leader Scott Newton. He comes across the line another time doing a 1:16.7. Looking at the lap time between him and Mark Usher only with a 1:17.7, so that's a full second that Scott Newton gained there on P2. The gap between these two drivers now is 3.1 seconds. In the meantime, Thomas Seeger behind, he only managed a 17.5, so Thomas Seeger gained 0.2 of a second to Mark Usher. But still, that gap between P2 and P3 at this point of the race is still over 6 seconds.
And you can see how hard our race leader is. Scott is driving there. Scott Newton, the rear end of his car, stepping up through the chicane. Now, we did have a spin last lap. It didn't cost any positions, but Jan Hoffman went for a spin. He'd been having a quiet race in 6th place. He had 10 seconds over Danilo Sanfilippo behind him in 7th, so he was able to come back out on track in 6th place. But now you can see Danilo Sanfilippo isn't 10 seconds by them anymore. It's more like 1 second.
Probably the closest battle that we have now, because these are 3 drivers, Jan Hofman, Danilo Sanfilippo, and behind them Steven Kempson, that are all separated by around 3 seconds at this moment. All these drivers are currently driving in P6, P7, P8. They also started in P6, P7 and P8, and it just reversed the order that was seen on the grid. But looking at Steven Kempson, he's looking feisty. He was quickest of the 3 in qualifying, and he looks to be able to have some extra pace on Danilo Sanfilippo at this point of the race. He was close out of the hairpin then, and look here on the single straight, he just gets closer and closer. He has more top speed than the car in front of him. He breaks through the wall of champion chicane. Oh, and in front, that's Jan Hoffman in the wall, I think, because he gets very slow there. No, he didn't get in the wall, but wow, Jan Hoffman really got lucky there to not ruin his race there.
So he definitely lost a lot of speed and momentum. If his car is not damaged, we'll see if he's able to gain these 2 positions back. The thing that's got to be worrying Hoffman now is that's 2 pretty big mistakes he's had in 2 consecutive laps.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about earlier, about concentration. And after that happens, you really have to tell yourself, like, I was doing good earlier, I can continue doing good. You have to really calm yourself down to make sure you don't make any extra mistakes, because after sliding a few times like that, Steven Kempson once again gets sliding, however, out of the turn 9 chicane there, right in front of Jan Hoffman. Jan could just avoid him there. We go to a replay of that incident. Steven Kempson was really giving it all. He was so close to the car in front of him. Just look here on the in turn 9. He so maybe a little bit too much that unsettles his car, loops it around. That costs him 1 position to Jan Hoffman. Andrew Adair Sanders, who was currently driving in P9, isn't close enough to close down the gap. Steven Kempson also on the hairpin, he was very wiggly, losing once again a lot of time by spinning his car.
So the driver who has the biggest gain out of that is Danilo Sanfilippo in that battle. He's been the one driver who hasn't spun out of all of it, and that's moved him up to 6th place. Meanwhile, as we get Danilo on camera here, give him some screen time, and rightfully so, it's worth noting that the gap between the 2 leaders has decreased. I have a feeling a lot of it came due to that slide that we saw Scott Newton have. At the start of that lap, the gap between himself and Usher was 3 seconds. Now it's down to 1.5 seconds.
Yeah, it was 2 laps ago. Scott Newton lost 1.5 seconds to Mark Usher, but looking at them, both drivers setting their personal best lap times now. Mark Usher is 16.4, Scott Newton is 16.3. Both these drivers are really putting down the hammer now, with Scott Newton just slightly increasing the gap once again from setting the quickest lap of the race.
They're working lap 17 of 46 here. Round 6 of the batteries not include the championship at the circuit. Gilles Villeneuve, Scott Newton leading. He started second, got the lead right off the get-go. He beat Mark Usher into the first corner. Definitely two drivers we're going to want to keep an eye on in the championship fight during the second half of the season, but they've got some catching up to do in points to the drivers in third and fourth behind them. Thomas Ziegler and Clayton McLeod are running in those positions respectively. And as the championship becomes more important in the closing rounds, points will become more important. And as we mentioned, not a whole lot of points for these mid-of-pack positions today because of a smaller field. If you want to get points today, you got to get up on that podium.
Absolutely, as Stephen Kempson goes for another half spin right at this moment. He slightly damages his front wing there. That was on the exit of turn 7. He gets overtaken by Andrew Adair Sanders. He gets it going again, but like I said, he probably has some damage on his front wing. Mark Usher on top of the screen. He just did the quickest lap time of the race, a 1:16.2. Was 1/10 of a second quicker than Scott Newton with that. These two drivers are really, I said it before 1 lap ago, but they're really giving it out. They're setting quickest lap time after quickest lap time. They're really not holding back at this point of the race. They know that if they want to score a lot of points, like you mentioned, Sam, they have to get by each other and really win this race. But both of these drivers also know that they already have a few drop weeks used by not showing up. So they don't really have the luxury that, for example, Clayton McLeod or Thomas Ziegler have that have showed up every race. They don't have that no-show buffer that they can use. They know that every race they participate in will count for the championship. And a mistake here will really cost them in the championship aspirations. In P6 at the moment, there's a battle going on between Danilo Sanfilippo and Jan Hofman. Jan Hofman, we saw him spin a little bit earlier in the race. Now he has found some speed again. He's closing down the gap to Danilo in front of him. Last time around it was only 0.2 of a second, but Jan Hofman seems a little bit feisty though. The gap between them is around 0.6 of a second at the moment. He needs a good run here out of the hairpin. Danilo gets a little bit wider though. I would almost imagine that he would lose a little bit speed because of that racing line, but the outside line gave him more momentum. Jan Hofman had to check up a little bit earlier. He loses a lot of time and cannot give himself an opportunity for an overtake there going into the final chicane.
So the battle will continue as they come back on down the front straight, and Hoffman will try and line him up for something next lap. Now, it should be worth noting at this point that Sanfilippo out-qualified Hoffman, but not by very much, only 0.7 of a second, so these two pretty even Stevens on pace. This battle could turn out to be in either of their favour.
Just a quick update on David Lee Patterson. We saw him around half the race ago hit the wall of the inside of turn 7 quite hard. He went into the pits for repairs, but he also hung up the helmet for today. He is our third retiree of today here at Circuit Villenueve.
Yeah, and only one car a lap down right now, Jean Brunet, so still 10 cars out there running on the lead lap as we approach halfway. And that's pretty good considering how small this track is, but now the battle for 6 is brewing again. Danilo Sanfilippo took a wide line, swerving on down the back straight, trying to break a draft, but that's just going to hurt his momentum. John Hoffman must be running a lower downforce there because he just blasts by almost like as DRS on these 2009 cars. There's not, and Hoffman gets the position.
Yeah, Danilo really hurt himself there, but just outbraking himself going into the hairpin and that outside line. He had the outside line last time around, and that time it helped him, but just outbraking himself, he couldn't go as early as he wanted on the throttle. And you could just see how much more straight line speed Jan Hofman has because of that. So it's Danilo back to P7, Jan Hofman going to P6. A P8 behind it. The battle's heating up as well with Stephen Kempson trying to recover from another spin. Ooh, his car gets very loose there through turn 2. He's right on the rear of the green car of Andrew Adair Sanders in front of him. Andrew started the race in P11. He's one of our hard chargers here today, winning 3 positions already since the start of the race, but only by not making any mistakes. He's really consistent so far. And he's just winning positions that way. Behind him, Stephen Kempson is pushing here on the exit of turn 7. We saw him spin a few times already. He cannot get the power down quickly enough to be able to try and move here on the inside of turn 8. But he's trying to set himself up. Oh, both cars outbraking themselves, and especially Andrew Adair is hurt by that because he gets a slowdown penalty, and it's an easy overtake for Stephen Kempson.
So that will resolve that battle, and those cars 8th and 9th on the lead lap. So let's give a shout out to the last lead lap car, because I think this is the one driver we haven't mentioned at all today, and that's Dirk Buten. Just having a quiet race out there in 10th position. And I've got to admit, having run a paint scheme very similar to that before, I have a feeling that orange and yellow work beautifully together.
I completely agree. That's a beautiful car that Dirk is driving with at the moment. Also another driver that gained 2 positions since the start of the race. I think that his biggest rival at this point of the race is Jean Brunet. He is driving in 11th place, but Jean Brunet, of course, is 1 lap down compared to Dirk Boutken. Dirk will be trying to concentrate on not making any mistakes and really consolidate his top 10 position that he currently has until the checkered flag drops.
Alright, well, pit window should definitely be open now.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to say Jan Hofman is currently sitting in the pits. Now, is that a regular pit stop? That is not a regular pit stop because he actually hit the wall last time around in turn 5 that was. And he hit the wall quite hard. I wouldn't be surprised if this race over. This is very similar to that crash that Lance Stroll had earlier in the year in the actual Formula 1 race here in Montreal. Now, of course, Lance Stroll was being helped into the wall by someone else, but look there, Jan Hofman almost looks like a hardware failure or something, going suddenly straight in that corner. And that left side of that car, both suspensions, the front and rear one, will be heavily damaged after that contact.
And that's a shame because he was running 6th, but let's talk about the guys running up front because they are nose to tail right now. Marc Uscher's really ran Newton down, and pit window is open. Is any of them going to opt out of this battle? Take a scheduled pit stop, or are we about to see a fight? Because Uscher has a run, he's looking to the outside. They're going to be side by side into the final chicane. This is for the lead. Down into the pits comes Uscher.
Oh, that scares Scott Newton, who loops it around. Scott Newton did not expect that. He spins it around. You can see in the back of the screen. He has to reverse at the final corner of the track, gets it going again, but that's an incredible amount of time that Scott Newton loses.
And this is a big win for Uscher. I don't know if he's going to know that Newton had the spin.
I would imagine so. Looking at your F3 screen, you see that car suddenly not gaining. Scott Newton just being forced to take that inside line. That's a line that he hasn't been able to take, or didn't need to take early in the race. You can see it here. He just spins it around and he has to take a freeway point turn before he can get it going again. Now, of course, Scott Newton didn't have any damage because of that, but man, that amount of time that he loses might as well count for damage, because that's a lot of track position that he loses there. Thomas Seeger really closes the gap to Scott Newton. Now, in the meantime, Marc Uscher comes out of the pits basically in no man's land. A big gap between him and Marco Sanfilippo in front.
Yeah, that's, I know we've had races where we've said, boy, the top drivers have been the class of the field today, but this shows you it's actually been quite close here today, with Marc Uscher at one scheduled pit stop costing him all the way back to 5th place. Now, of course, he'll get those positions back when Ziga and McLeod and Marco Sanfilippo come down into the pits, but still showing it's quite tight. Now, Scott Newton's into the pits now. He's probably wanting to get off those damaged hot tyres from that spin, and we'll find out exactly how much time he has lost to Uscher here.
Incredible amount of time, because Marc Uscher is screaming over Casino Straight there. He's already braking for the final chicane. He is getting over the start-finish straight, while Scott Newton is not even stationary yet at this pit crew. He's stationary now. Let's look for Marc Uscher. He's there on screen over the start-finish line. He will have a lot of time. Scott Newton gets underway. Waiting. Light is flickering. Very long stop there. Ooh, that's a very long stop for Scott Newton. I didn't expect that he would lose this amount of time, but that's a really long stop for the Australian. Yeah, he's still standing still. Now he gets underway again. Look at where he is. He's currently driving just in front of Danilo Sanfilippo, also went to pits. In front of Stephen Kempson, who's also coming for the pits. That's all the way down to P5 for the Australian.
That was bordering not scheduled, the length of pit stops, as Danilo Sanfilippo comes out. That's how long it should be. So I'm not sure what was going on with Scott Newton there. That might almost leave him out in the battle for 2nd place with Thomas Ziga once this is all said and done.
And just to visualize it, Marc Uscher is just coming out of the hairpin while Scott Newton is still in turn 8 and 9. So that's an incredible amount of time between these two drivers as Thomas Seeger is coming in for his pit stop. Now, let's compare where the DH driver will come out compared to Scott Newton, because I think that will be a really tight battle for P2.
I think it will be indeed as well. Ziege brings his car to a halt. His car goes up on the tracks. It'll be awesome once iRacing is able to animate Formula 1 pit crews, won't it? It'll take a bit of animation. But right now, Thomas Ziege doesn't care about that. He doesn't need his animated pit crew anymore. He doesn't even need to worry about Scott Newton. He's miles ahead of him.
And I'm curious if Scott Newton maybe had some problems in his pit stop, maybe with some software that he's using to calculate his fuel or something, because that pit stop is abnormally long that he had to take there. He loses the P2 position to Thomas Seeger, and I will be surprised as well where Marco Sanfilippo will come out and Clayton McLeod will come out while they make their pit stop. Clayton McLeod and Marco Sanfilippo, they are currently your leaders here in Montreal.
Yes, Clayton McLeod currently leading the field around, doesn't get any bonus points from this. However, he might find himself a position up once he comes out of the pits. Is he going to make his scheduled stop yet? No, he's not. But Marco Sanfilippo is. Now, this will be telling because Marco Sanfilippo was only about a second or two back of Clayton McLeod. So it'll be telling where Marco comes out with relation to Scott Newton. That'll tell us where Clayton will come out with relation to him too.
Thomas Seeger is currently screaming over Casino Straight at the moment. He for sure will be able to overtake Marco Sanfilippo. Now Scott Newton now is going over Casino Straight, and that will be a lot tighter, especially because Scott Newton in front of him has a little bit of lap traffic. Jean Brunet. Oh, Jean Brunet actually goes into the pits as well, so that is good news for Scott Newton. Comes out of the final chicane now as Marco Sanfilippo gets underway. Marco Sanfilippo already out of the pits now. This will be very tight, but I think that the Italian will have the advantage. He does have the advantage, because that's around a 2-3 second gap between the Australian and the Italian there. And the advantage of the Sanfilippo driver, which also will mean that if Clayton McLeod comes in right now, he will be in front of Scott Newton.
And that means that Mark Usher, Stephen Kempson has just had another spin down at the hairpin again. Stephen Kempson's got to be one of those drivers happy that this league doesn't penalise incident points today. As Clayton McLeod stays out for another lap. So, once this is all said and done, Mark Usher will be the leader of a race, and Thomas Ziege will be second, Clayton McLeod will be third, and so that essentially will mean what we're looking at here is a battle for fourth place right now, when it's all said and done, between Marco Sanfilippo and Scott Newton.
Absolutely, there's two drivers that haven't made a pit stop yet. That is Clayton McLeod and Andrew Adair Sanders as well. Andrew is currently sitting in P6. He will fall behind Danilo Sanfilippo and Stephen Kempson, I think, while he visits his pit crew. As you see on screen at the moment, it is Andrew driving around. I'm very curious though when Clayton and Andrew will make their pit stops, because once that happens, then we'll be able to see where every driver stands, and also what this will mean for the rest of the race. We saw, for example, that Scott Newton was quicker than Clayton McLeod during the beginning of the race, but once you have the track position, we also saw that it's quite easy to defend here, especially with the setup that, for example, Clayton McLeod seems to have. So Scott Newton really has to make his chest wet and really prepare himself for some battling in this latter half of the race.
And Clayton is coming into the pits now. Apparently they put some water on his chest, but it should come out in third position. You are going to have to explain to me that phrase later, huh? So of course, as Usher goes into the lead now, we expect Thomas Ziege to go into second place.
He's still stationary at this moment, still waiting for it to be done. He now goes down the jacks. Thomas Ziege gets by him, and now he gets going again. Marco Sanfilippo coming out of the final chicane now. Scott Newton as well. This will be close. Not as close as I thought it would be, because Clayton McLeod is now on the exit of turn 2. The gap between him and Marco Sanfilippo is bigger than it was between Scott Newton and Sanfilippo when he finishes pit stop. So Scott Newton, because of that spin in the final chicane, he loses 4 positions and is relegated to P5.
Alright, so with Hoffman now having retired from the race, that means we've got 10 cars left out there, 7 of them on the lead lap, and Kempson has spun at the hairpin again. Now, we're still waiting for Andrew Adair Saunders to make his pit stop, and when he does, it's going to be a very quick one. And, of course, we're keeping half an eye on this battle for 4th place as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Only 18 laps to go, of course. So Andrew Adair Saunders will be out in the whip when he visits his pit crew. Now, he will fall back a little bit once he does so. And the top 5 doesn't have to worry about pit stops anymore. They will now have to fight it out on track with Scott Newton here, just behind Sanfilippo. Sanfilippo was very close to P4 before when he was right on the tail of Clayton McLeod. Now he makes a little mistake though in the final chicane, and that's a little bit anticlimactic, I almost would say, because Scott Newton immediately gets by him side by side towards turn 1. Marco just gives up that corner well before the braking zone. He lets Scott Newton by, so that's 1 position done for the Australian, who now has his eyes set on Clayton McLeod in front of him.
Yeah, that was one thing Clayton McLeod did not want to see. He would have wanted to have hoped that Sanfilippo and Newton would have battled it out for a couple of laps. He would have been able to gain some time. But now I have a feeling Newton might be coming for our number 1 driver very quickly in the coming laps, and we still have quite a ways left to go. Now, of course, I also have a feeling though that if Scott does run down Clayton McLeod and pass him in the coming laps, Clayton McLeod will then become Marco Sanfilippo's biggest fan, because he'll want him to go up there and get 2nd place from Tomasika.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things we were mentioning before in the race, because the field today isn't as big as we've seen early in the season. Every position that you win nets you a lot of points. Thomas Seeger is currently sitting in P2. Scott Newton has the speed at this point of the race to relegate Clayton McLeod to P4, and if it stands like that, it will be Thomas Seeger doing an incredible amount of good business and really closing the gap even more to the Canadian and Championship standings. But at the same time, it is once again Mark Usher leading the race, scoring a lot of points doing so, and he will still have some drop weeks on his tally, but he will surely do good business for the championship to really put himself in the top 5. On screen at the moment we see Andrew Adair Saunders being followed by Sanfilippo. This battle is closing and closing, but remember, Andrew still has to come in for his pit stop. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little half spin there.
Yeah, I almost question his decision to stay out there because Danilo Sanfilippo was coming so fast. I almost wonder if he would have gained more time serving his pit stop now and not having to fight Danilo, but small mistake, a battle's over. It'll still be interesting seeing after his quick pit stop where Saunders comes out. He qualified 11th. We mentioned there's only 10 cars left anyway, so he's going to finish better than where he qualified no matter what happens. But how high can he finish?
Marco Sanfilippo currently being hung out a little bit to dry though. Scott Newton got by
Kempson. Stephen Kempson has had another error, and this time he's just going to tow it into the pits.
Poor Kempson, his day really goes from bad to worse now.
And Jean Burnett has had a spin. It's all happening right now. I don't know if the sun just came out or something, but teammates not having a good time.
Oh, you were mentioning before that concentration, especially in the second part of the race, will be more and more difficult. Now, as it stands, we have 2/3 of the race done, only 1/3 to go. And you can see drivers just making slight mistakes there. A little bit too happy on the throttle, Chambrinet was there. He just loops it around, and that will cost him quite a bit of time. Now, luckily for him, he didn't get overtaken because behind him was Jan Hofman. Jan Hofman, we saw him hit the wall a few laps ago. He, in the meantime, has retired from the race. Jean Brunet didn't lose any position, but he did lose a little bit of time in his quest to try and close the gap to Dick Boetgen in front of him.
And Danilo Sanfilippo has had another off as well. Because Andrew Adair Saunders is all of a sudden sitting back in 6th place, and Danilo Sanfilippo is down in 7th. I expected drivers to make mistakes today, Johan. I didn't expect as many times today that we've seen for drivers to make mistakes and be able to get away with them.
In all fairness to Danilo, I just had a little look what happened with him. He had an incredibly small but also incredibly costly mistake. He outbraked himself in the final chicane and just had a small slowdown because of that. that cost him so much time that Andrew Adair Sanders got by him. Now Andrew Adair Sanders once again doesn't go into the pits. It's already lap 32 this time around, and the UKNI the DX driver still has to come in for his pit stop. And he still likes those tires. He still likes the low fuel load as well. With only 14 laps to go, he just wants to stay out and make quality laps.
I think he'll be able to come out in 6th place now. In 7th place now. I know Danilo Sanfilippo is right behind him. He's not going to be able to do anything about that. But now with Stephen Kempson pulling it into the pits, and I don't know if he has any intentions of coming back out. The driver in 8th position, Dirk Bitan, is over half a lap behind Andrew Adair Saunders right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if Saunders just comes out in P7 once again and continues the race from there. Now a little bit up front, we were saying Mark Usher P1, Thomas Seeger, Clayton McLeod finishing the podium, and then Scott Newton and Marco Sanfilippo P4 and P5. That was how it stands at the moment. It still stands like that, but the gaps are getting closer, especially in that final battle for the final podium position. Clayton McLeod last time around did a 117.3. Scott Newton behind him a 116.5. That's almost a second that the Australian won there. The gap between these two drivers, as you can see on screen, is less than 2 seconds. So Scott Newton really putting the pressure on the Canadian, and if he continues to speed like this, he will be on his gearbox 3 laps from now.
I wonder how much Clayton McLeod is going to put up a fight. Now, you would think he would do, because this is for a podium position in the closing laps of his home race. And also, let's not forget, we saw early on, it looks like Clayton McLeod has his car trimmed to a very low downforce setting, so it's hard for the drivers to pass him on the straightaway. But that being said, if he didn't put up a fight, and if Scott Newton just blasted on by, then Scott Newton might have enough time to run down Thomas Ziegler for 2nd place as well. And I have a feeling in the championship battle, one thing Clayton McLeod would not want to see is McLeod finish 4th and Ziegler finish 2nd.
Absolutely, because that will be a lot of point deficit in the advantage of Thomas Seeger. He will really close the gap and maybe even get by the Canadian if that happens. It's difficult to say. Clayton McLeod does have the speed now. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually gives to the zone and try to keep Scott Newton behind him. It is his home Grand Prix. It is a podium position. It is important for the championship. It will be very interesting to see what happens between the two. Now, no matter what happens, is good news for Thomas Seeger, because at the moment he is 5.5 seconds in front of Clayton McLeod. With the speed that Thomas Seeger has compared to Scott Newton, it will be right at the end of the race that Thomas Seeger will be put under pressure by the Australian. I think that Thomas Seeger, if he could just continues like this, he can come home with P2.
Ziegler would definitely like it. He's had some strong performances recently. He hasn't brought home a win yet, but he's definitely having some championship finishing performances. Right now, he's sitting 12 laps away from what looks like will be a podium finish, but where on the podium? Will Clayton McLeod be on the podium? We have 12 laps to find that out as well, because as they come across the line, McLeod picks up his time a bit, and actually, his lap time last lap around was a tiny bit faster than Scott Newton's. But was that just an outlier?
Yeah, I would almost say that it was not necessarily Clayton McLeod being a lot quicker, but more Scott Newton being a lot slower. He was doing consistent 1/16s before that for 3 laps in a row. Last time around, he only managed to 117.2. Now, mind you, that's still incredibly quick from Scott Newton. Not as quick as he was doing earlier, so those giant leaps seem to be shrinking down a little bit. As you can see, as the gap gets slower, or gets closer to 1 second, it will of course be more and more difficult for Scott Newton to follow the car in front through this twisty infield section.
One thing, well, there's 2 things for certain in this race. One is that we're going to end up with some kind of podium scrap going on by the end. And 2 is people will be inspecting Andrew Adair Saunders' fuel tank at the end of this race.
Absolutely, because with 36 laps in the books, he's still just running around out there. Now the gap between him and Danilo Sanfilippo is only 3 seconds at this moment. That's a battle waiting for happen soon as well. And Andrew just keep turning laps out there. Maybe he's just forgetting that he has to make a pit stop because he's making no intentions ready to that he actually wants to visit this pit crew soon. Intentions making ready also is Scott Newton though. The gap between him and Clayton McLeod going over start-finish time last time around was only half a second. Look at these two drivers. They are almost nose to tail in the battle for the final podium position as Scott Newton almost loses it there in turn 7. What a catch from the Australian there to not loop it around and lose a lot of time. He only loses a little bit of time now, and the gap that he has closed down, he has to close down now once again.
And Cinderella has a curfew. Saunders is in the pits. So it took him 34 laps or 35 laps to find it. Oh, and Mark Usher just hit the wall. Our race leader just grazed the wall of champions. I don't think it's enough to damage his car, but we'll get a replay of it here. He's got a 20-second lead.
Yeah, especially the 20-second lead will be very important. Now, just go on board with him here. He has a little wiggle in the middle of the corner as he brakes for the final chicane. He hits the curbstone a little bit too hard on the left-hand side. You can see him there. Just hits a little bit too hard, sends him to the wall, and that little hit doesn't give him a lot of damage, but it might hurt the handling a bit. And we saw that earlier in the race as well with Alan Morgan, who did basically the same thing, and that hurt him so much that he actually retired his car. And Mark Usher had 18 seconds to Thomas Seeger last time around, with around 10 more laps to go. He does have the spare time to just drop down the pace a little bit, make sure that he doesn't spin it around and continue driving as he's doing. Yeah, that little tap there on the wall will not help Mark Usher in the final parts of this race.
One driver who can't afford to back off is Clayton McLeod because Scott Newton is right on his rear end now, and as long as he gets through this hairpin corner without making too large of an error, Newton will have a great slipstream on McLeod going on down the back straight, and he'll be able to attempt to pass into the final chicane. However, he does not get a good run out of a hairpin. Clayton McLeod, we know he has a fast car in the straight line, and Newton's not going to be able to do anything with him. All of a sudden, from mistakes that he's making, a lot of it could be due to the aero wake coming off of Clayton McLeod's F1 car. But Scott Newton is losing valuable time and track with which to run down Thomas Seeger if he was able to get Clayton McLeod. And I have a feeling Clayton McLeod has got to be aware of that now. He realises, okay, Thomas Seeger is probably going to finish this race in second. I've got to do everything I can to finish this race in third.
It's just incredible to see what difference there is speed-wise on Casino Straight. And I will almost say that it's maybe part of the setup, but also just a driving line that Clayton McLeod is taking. Around the hairpin, he takes a way wider line compared to Scott Newton. Scott is way more acute through that corner, and that's not helping him his speed on that straight. This time though, as they're going through turn 8 and 9 here, the speed... Oh, Scott Newton gets a wiggle hard in the wall. That's race over for the Australian there. He was so close, and that was maybe the aero wake you were talking about, Sam. In the middle of the corner, that's a very, very evil wiggle that he had there. Going over the curbstone, couldn't save it. Car snaps while it finds grip again and just torpedoes itself hard into the wall.
And boy, this race has gone downhill for Scott Newton. Normally it's opposite. Scott Newton's a driver who doesn't get good starts and then has comebacks during the middle of a race. Completely opposite today. He started second, he won the race into turn 1, he was dominating the first half, and then Mark Usher kind of threw a fake challenge at him as he came in for his pit stop. That threw Newton off. He had to spin, and then he had a long pit stop, and then he couldn't get by Clayton McLeod to trying a bit too hard there, makes a mistake, puts it in the wall, and a very unfortunate end to what was looking like a promising race early on for Scott Newton. And also, let's not overlook the fact that we're about to see Mark Usher show up at 3 races and win all 3 of them. This is a driver we are definitely going to have to keep an eye on in our closing 6 weeks.
Absolutely, Mark Usher really showing why he has participated in 3 races and also won all 3 races. He really has speed and just the capabilities to dominate every time that he shows up on the track. In the meantime, though, as we were talking or watching Scott Newton make his mistake and end his race in the wall, Jean Brunet also did the same. Now don't have to go to that incident. It also happened a little while ago. But he is also currently sitting in the pits, and I think that it's race over for Brunet as well, which means that we only have 7 cars still left running at the moment. With Dirk Boetgen currently the last car on the track. He is 1 lap down together with Andrew and their Salmers.
Yeah, those two can end up with nice finishes there. Andrew in 6th place and Dirk in 7th after just having quiet races and staying out of trouble. Also a bit of insurance for our championship contenders if they do hit trouble in the closing laps. At the worst they'll finish is about 6th or 7th. But right now, and Jean Brunet is actually coming back out on the circuit, so he might be trying to pick off a couple of positions, although his car's crabbing a little bit as he goes down pit road. I almost wonder if he's not going to go back out.
Yeah, let's actually see how that car is behaving of Jean Brunet at the moment as he's going out of the pits, because that was a really heavy hit that he had there. And he seems to be very tentative on the throttle there, trying to see how his car is feeling. Here, the first heavy braking zone. Oh, he's just very slow through here.
Oh, and
also doesn't
Dirk
turn
Bouteng that's just spun in front of him, and Dirk Bouteng just had a spin. It's not going to cost him any position, so he's in 7th.
And in the meantime, we did see Jean Brunet putting his car to a halt again. He took a tow back to the grid. And that is race over for him. Now looking at Dirk Boetgen here, was once again coming through turn 7 that it happened. A lot of drivers struggling with turn 7, especially the part where they go on throttle again. Here, just a little bit too much throttle, spinning it around, not hitting the wall, but losing a little bit of time. And the battle between him and Andrew Adair Sanders is probably over for now, in the advantage of Sanders.
Smoke off the tyres, fire on the race car. What that livery looks like.
In the meantime, the battle for P3 isn't over because Scott Newton might be gone, Marco Sanfilippo isn't, and he is closing down to Clayton McLeod quite heavily though. Last 2 laps were horrible for Clayton McLeod, a 119 and a 118. The gap between him and Sanfilippo is less than a second at the moment, coming out of turn 9. Marco Sanfilippo with consistent 117 and 116 sometime. He is 1-2 seconds per lap quicker than the Canadian in front of him. Out of the hairpin now. Oh, look at Clayton McLeod. He's completely understeering there. Marco Sanfilippo tried to give him a little bit of space. That actually hurt him on the exit there. On the straight line, Marco Sanfilippo is quicker, however. He's closing out the gap. This doesn't seem like he's quick enough to try and move here in the final chicane. He brakes a little bit earlier, but he's setting himself up for a move now maybe into turn 1. Little wiggle for Sanfilippo once again. He doesn't have the speed now to try and move in turn 1, but the Italian really putting the pressure on McLeod for that final podium position.
Yeah, this is a battle that's really came out of nowhere. It looked like Clayton McLeod was going to safely get 3rd position, and then for whatever reason, I don't know if he hit a curb the wrong way, it gave a little tear in his front wing or something, but his last few laps have all been quite slow. And Marco Sanfilippo has been able to run him down. Obviously, if Clayton does have damage or anything, he's going to fight against it because he's not in a hurry to let Marco by him. And we've got a battle for our final podium spot with just 4.5 laps now left to go at Montreal.
I'm trying to figure out what exactly happened with Clayton McLeod, because you would almost say that this speed difference, that this sudden lack in speed, has to be a mechanical problem. I cannot see him hitting the wall in the last few laps, so we maybe have to ask the Canadian after the race is over. But what matters at the moment is that Marco Sanfilippo really has the pace. His last lap time was even 1:16.8 compared to the 1:18.0 of Clayton McLeod. That's a 1.2 second speed difference between the two. Marco Sanfilippo has a good run here out of the final chicane. You can maybe take a look, very late look there on the inside of turn 1. Oh, Clayton McLeod cuts him off there. Rightly so. It was a little bit too far out for Marco Sanfilippo to try and move, but taking that little look makes him quite nervous. It's a little bit wiggly on throttle there, however, so he loses a little bit of time. But with the speed difference that Marco currently has, a little bit of time loss won't hurt him that much, because I would almost guess that when they hit the hairpin again, Marco Sanfilippo will be on the back of Clayton McLeod. Although, once again there in turn 7 he had another wiggle. And this time around, maybe this is a little bit too far around to be right on the rear of Clayton McLeod once you reach the hairpin.
Yeah, he had a big error down there in turn 7 and 8. That definitely cost him a bit of track to Clayton McLeod, although it'll be interesting to see if he can still get slipstream. He's definitely better on the brakes there for the hairpin. He should be able to get his draft down the back straight here. Not entirely convinced he'll have enough to be able to make a move.
Seems to be a little bit too far behind now. Maybe he can use a bit of traffic in front of them as well. Andrew Sanders isn't too far in front of this pair. He will be caught quite quickly, I imagine, as well. That might actually be effective in this podium battle. And just a quick update about our leader, Mark Asher. We saw him hit the wall a few laps ago. We were wondering if that gave him some damage and slowed him down. Well, the answer is absolutely not. He is doing 1/16 very consistently. He has grown the gap to Thomas Seeger to an incredible 22 seconds at this point of the race. Mark Usher is not even consolidating his lead. He's still trying to continue and grow it with only 3 more laps to go.
He's actually about to hit a bit of lap traffic, which shouldn't be too much of an issue with only 7 cars out here on track. However, we have almost a third of the field in a tight battle here for third position with Clayton McLeod with 2.5 laps left to go. Marco Sanfilippo has navigated his way through the infield a lot better this time around. He's trying to stick his nose in for the hairpin. I don't know how much that would gain him, because really the key is to get a good exit here. Once again though, Clayton McLeod gets a nice launch going onto the back straight, and due to the low downforce settings we believe he has on that car, he's able to keep it out in front for now. Marco Sanfilippo, if he can get through this chicane, well, he might be able to attempt something in turn number 1. They go by the wall of champions there. Clayton gets a bit of a better exit again. 2 laps left to go.
It almost seems like Clayton McLeod has practiced 2 corners, especially on the circuit. Those are the hairpin and the final chicane, because the speed difference that he has there is just amazing compared to Marco Sanfilippo. He's really able to create gaps there where you wouldn't expect him to be able to create them. If you look at the rest of the lap, Marco Sanfilippo was probably thinking about that while he was trying to take a look on the inside of going into the hairpin of that corner, because he probably realizes that the final or the big 2 straights on Circuit Gilles Villeneuve are not enough for him to try and find a way past Clayton McLeod. He has to find very creatively another corner and try to make the overtake stick there.
And as we watch this battle, when they're nose to tail down the back straight this time by, the white flag will be out in the air to start the final lap for Mark Usher. But we're going to keep an eye on this, although I don't know if we need to right now, because once again, McLeod gets a much better run down the back straight than Marco. And Marco will have to depend on getting a nice run through the chicane. He's much late on the brakes once again. He might be able to do something in turn 1. He does have more speed this time. He'll look down the inside. Clayton McLeod, though, we've known in the past he hasn't been the easiest driver to pass, and this time it's nice and clean. He stays ahead in 3rd place. Marco Sanfilippo will have to try and make something happen as they're coming to the checkered flag.
Oh, but he completely outbrakes himself here in going into turn 4. That cost him a lot of time. He will have a little bit of time left, half a lap left to close down the gap to Clayton McLeod and try it one more time going into the hairpin or into the final chicane. Going here through turn 7, he makes up around 3 car length.
And going into the final chicane right now is Mark Usher, who is looking for his 3rd victory and his 3rd appearance in the series. And Mark Usher is going to win here today from pole at Montreal. But boy, it wasn't easy. And 3rd place is definitely not going to be easy either. Who's going to get it?
Going out of the chicane, Clayton McLeod very loose. Oh, we haven't seen it, and Marco Sanfilippo gets caught out because of that. He spins it around, hits the wall, damages his front wing. Now behind him, there's no other car. It is battle over. It is Clayton McLeod. Just wiggles a little bit too much, and I think that almost caught Marco Sanfilippo out behind him.
Yeah, well,
Clayton McLeod goes very slow at the moment.
Yeah, so Clayton McLeod will get 3rd place here. Or will he? You mentioned he's very slow. Marco Sanfilippo is coming in a hurry, but he'll run out of track. Clayton McLeod, yeah, out of fuel, but still gets 3rd place. That
will be extra heartbreak for Marco Sanfilippo, because if if he didn't have that spin coming out of the hairpin on the last lap, he would have been on the podium with Clayton McLeod running out of fuel. What a battle between these two drivers, though. Incredible fight, and Clayton McLeod getting that podium in his home GP.
Alright, well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we will be back to talk to some of our top finishers here on GSRC and the iRacing Esports Network. Hello and welcome back to Montreal, where we just witnessed round 6 of a Batteries Not Included Championship here on GSRC and the iRacing Esports Network. And at the end of the day, the winner of it all was Marcus from pole position. He didn't lead the race into the first turn, but he led them all across the checkered flag. Thomas Ziegler came home in second place, almost half a minute back, and then Clayton McLeod rounded out the podium, even if he didn't really have any fuel in his car at the end there. Marco Sanfilippo, despite his spin, finishes 4th. That battle was always going to be for 3rd and 4th, because right before the end of the race, Danilo Sanfilippo went a lap down ahead of Andrew Adair Saunders, who I think we might actually get to talk to in just a moment. He finishes in 6th place, and Dirk Butin rounded out the cars that actually finished today's race, Johan.
Yeah, and I will mention the retirees, starting with Scott Newton, our leader for a long part in the race. He in the end finished it in the wall. He's classified in P8. Jean Brunet, another driver that we talked about a few times, gains 5 positions, but in the end finishes and is classified in P9. Stephen Kempsel, we saw turn around a lot. He's classified in P10, and then behind him in It is Jan Hoffman, David Lee Patterson, and Alan Morgan rounding out the cars that actually saw the green flag, with Manuel Gomez Esteban not making the grid.
Well, our podium finishers are up there doing their virtual celebration right now, so let's go back a couple positions. But, Andrew, you probably have a lot to celebrate, up 5 positions from where you qualified and probably burned less fuel than anyone else in the race.
Well, I don't know how much fuel the others used, but fuel was never an issue thanks to the digital race engineer and some of their options, which can spare me a few calculations during the race, so I can really focus on driving. But really, the only thing I did was try to race to the finish, and I'm a bit surprised by the high rate of the attrition. I didn't expect to finish that high up, so I don't know else what to say. This is definitely a positive result for me, and surprising.
Yeah, we were looking at the chat after the race had finished that a lot of the drivers were saying the track was very slippery. You mentioned you were surprised by the amount of attrition. Was it hard to keep your car on the track though?
Sometimes, yeah, but not really. I just tried to keep my rhythm. Yeah, I kissed the wall of champions once. I'm unlucky to escape that one, but still, it's hard to explain. Of course, it was a little bit slippery, but that just means you have to be a little bit careful on the throttles. And even though I sometimes wasn't that careful, I still tried to keep my car straight and nowhere else.
Now, unless I'm mistaken, this is one of the first times we've seen you this season. Do you plan to be back for next week's race at Motegi, and are we going to see more of you in the future?
First of all, that's my second race, and the batteries not included. My first race was in Suzuka. Second of all, I do plan to drive more of these races. It wasn't my original plan at the start of the season. Let's just say some changes on iRacing's side has changed my plan.
All right. Well, thanks for coming to talk to us today, Andrew. We hope to talk to you more in the future. Good race today. They're finishing in 6th position.
Thank you very much.
All right. So that was Andrew Saunders. He was able to keep it clean through today's race. And Johan, you've caught up with someone who wasn't quite as fortunate.
Yeah, I'm talking with Scott Newton. Scott, welcome to the booth. Unfortunate to see what happened with you in the race. We saw a lot of people mention in the post-race chat that it was very slippery. We just asked Andrew Adair the same question, but also the same question to you, basically, is how was it out there on the track? Was it really slippery? Was it difficult to control the car and keep it in a straight line?
Yeah, hey, Johan. It was a little bit tricky today, to be honest, due to the fact that even though in testing I found that there was less grip in the actual race than I did during testing, even though there's a lot more cars on the track. So it might have been due to the track heat where the racing line was, or something else that could have affected it that was plaguing the drivers. But yeah, it was kind of unusual. But also, like, I had other technical issues that I was sorting out during this weekend and limited practice. So, yeah, sort of combination of everything for myself played a little bit of havoc today.
It's a shame to see what happened. Now, one thing that I was noticing, especially during the beginning parts of the race, was the partly cloudy weather that you guys were racing in. Really meant that one part of the racetrack was covered in full sunshine, and the other part of the racetrack was covered in cloud cover, and it seemed to change a lot. Did you notice that while you were driving, and was it making things more difficult, or you didn't really notice that much in the car?
Yeah, it was certainly noticeable going into turn 5 and 6, the left, right. as you're coming around the fast, like in between the trees there, and also at the hairpin as well, because I was pretty much on the limit of the braking of the tire, but it was still locking, even though I run a fairly sort of medium bias, but not too far back, but not too far forward, that it ultimately locked. So I have it like right where I need it to be, but yeah, I was still locking. So yeah, it was certainly an interesting one for having the like say the hairpin being a hotter part of the track, but then like say turn one and through the first sector, it was all reasonably grippy, but like just if you go in too hot through turn one, then obviously you overshoot turn two, so bit of compromise through that section of the track as well.
Exactly. Well, in the end, of course, you just mentioned that you were struggling with technical difficulties. It was difficult to control the car there, but it must be very comfortable, or at least positive, for you to see the pace that you had and the fact that you were driving in P1 for quite a while. Looking forward to the rest of the season. How comfortable are you, for example, for the race next week when we're going to Motegi? How are you looking forward to that race? How do you reckon your chances are there?
Yeah, Motegi is actually I would say a better track for me. But having said that, though, I'll be on a different setup, like as in rig, next week. So that's going to be fairly interesting, to say the least. I'm not going to be at home next week, but I'll be endeavouring to make it as best as I possibly can. So just having to adjust to the different pedal, like the different hardware and all that. But then also the track conditions. Motegi is pretty much has been notoriously a slippery track in the past due to the Japanese tarmac. So it might be a bit of the same as today, but it might prove a little bit more grippy than today.
We'll keep an eye on that for sure. Good luck at least with figuring out the new rig next week, and we'll hope to see you next week in Motegi.
Yeah, no, so cheers for that, Johan.
Scott Newton talking with us now. In the meantime, Sam, you have caught up with one of our podium finishers, Clayton McLeod.
Yeah, Clayton, you had a very interesting race today. How much of the time were you looking out of the front of the car, and how much were you spending in your wind mirrors?
Well, I think I was looking to the side there quite a bit. I was actually a little surprised at my fuel consumption. After my pit, it looked like I was going to be about a lap short. And so I was just Mr. Lift and Coast and hoping that somebody behind me would just keep making a mistake.
Is that how Sanfilippo was able to catch you in the first place? Because when we saw Scott Newton have his crash behind you, we thought, oh, well, there we go. Clayton McLeod has third place now. But then we looked twice, and Marco was right on your gearbox.
Yeah, I was thinking things were just normal when I came out of the pits, but a couple laps later, I'm glancing at my fuel and noticing that I'm in trouble. So I just had to hope for the best and try to save as much as I could. I ran out before the line too, so it was beyond close. It was too far.
Yeah, fortunately, we're still able to get on the podium there with Marco's spin coming out of the hairpin. What was your setup like for this race? It looked like, especially towards the start of the race, that when you had a bit of a train of cars behind you, but you were just able to gap them all going on down the back straight. Did you have a very low downforce setting?
Well, I always race what I share in the forums. That's not to say everybody's running that, but I think for the most part, most people should be running pretty much what I am. I don't know. Maybe they were second gear out of that corner leading onto the back straight, but I'm first gear through there. Maybe just that little bit helps.
Well, another podium finish here today. It will definitely give you a good stand-in heading into the second half of the championship. A good little points battle going on there with Thomas Ziga and Floris Bisha. And we look forward to maybe seeing you on the podium again in 1 week's time when the series heads to Motegi.
Yeah, they're going to be tough. Good win, Mark. Have a good one, guys.
All right, and that was third drive on our podium, Clayton McLeod. Well, even though we saw a lot of attrition today, Johan, we definitely saw a great race, and at the end of the day, some big names on the podium, and it's given us a good championship heading into the second half of the season.
Absolutely, like this was a great run, especially the battle between Thomas Seeger and Clayton McLeod is just heating up. These two drivers that have basically shown up every race, they're getting closer together. Thomas Seeger is closing down the gap, but Clayton McLeod is just hanging in there, getting good consistent results. At the same time, Mark Usher, we weren't seeing him at the top of the broadcast on the championship standing screen, but I'm pretty sure that next week when we visit Motegi, Mark Usher will be there, and he's certainly a driver that is there for the championship battle going forward.
Well, we would like to thank Clayton McLeod and all of the organisers and the competitors in the Battery Not Included Championship for coming out here today and putting on a great show. Thank you all as well for sticking around. We know we've had a couple of post-race technical difficulties here, and we appreciate you following along and hope that you'll stick around for Camel GT coming up next here on GSRC. Also, thanks to the guys at the iRacing Esports Network. Again, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe to those guys. We would also like to thank all of the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcasts, and you can see them listed on your screen. Additional thanks goes out to Eric Ekholm and June Lalonde who provide us with our music. See the screen for how to get hold of more of their great work. Thanks to the team today, Sean, Johan and Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, you can visit us at globalsimracingchannel.com. We're also on Twitter at GSR Channel, and be sure to like us on Facebook and check us on Instagram at GSRC_gram. All of the upcoming races for our other series are listed on your screen, so check those out, mark them down on your calendar, and don't miss another second of exciting racing action. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.